Honorable members, at the break, we were debating a compendium of bills. I presume that we are now ready. As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fox Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I wanted to take some time, in particular over the Law Reform and Revision Amendment Bill, and to perhaps make tangentially some comments about the other two bills, but I'm really taking the opportunity to talk about law reform and revision, and even that not so centrally, but as an opportunity to explain to some extent how things work in terms of legislation and why this is important. And to say in anticipation that there's probably going to be a new law reform commissioner appointed subsequent to this bill being passed. And that person will be employing considerable legal skills, having just retired from active duty as a judge.
That's how we do it. That's how we do it.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. But in doing so, and in anticipation of that, I want to do two things. First of all, the former president of the Court of Appeal is now retired. He was my classmate at St. Augustine's College.
Where's that?
St. Augustine's College. Yeah, right. Michael Barnett. And I think I've often said this. From the time he was a student in high school, from the very first sixth grade class or seventh grade class, whatever, they used to call Form 1 in those days, seventh grade class, now seventh grade. This man obviously wanted to be a lawyer. So we had this speech contest that we had to all learn these speeches. And we all had to choose a speech. And he chose a speech from Clarence Darrow's last address to the jury. You know, in the Scopes case, we come now to lay this man's case before this jury. That was Michael Barnett in the seventh grade. And he never deviated from that. And has turned out to be a good judge, I think. Had the right temperament for the job and understood. So he's now retired. We're on different political sides, but notwithstanding that, you know, he was a pretty good judge. Say? Yeah, right. He served as attorney. He served as Attorney General in Ingram's administration. How you figure he got there? He wasn't a PLP, I assure you. But good all the same. But succeeding him as president of the Court of Appeal is a person rather more personally connected to me, and I wanted to take this opportunity because the exigencies of my job on so many of these family occasions does not allow me to be at some of these ceremonies. So John Isaacs, who is now to be president of the Court of Appeal, is actually my second cousin. Our grandmothers were sisters. Bertha Isaacs was his grandmother. She was a Hannah. My grandmother was Gwenny Ford. She was a Hannah, Robert Hannah's daughters. And the connection is rather closer than that because as children, my great-grandfather had a home on East Bay Street. We still own the property today, which is right next to what then was Kelly's Bakery, but it's between Flowers Place and the East Bay Shopping Center. So it's a vacant property now. And as children, we all gathered there on a Friday afternoon, every Friday afternoon, and with the sisters, the grandmothers, the daughters, and all their children gathered there from about 3 o'clock after school closed, and we were there until dark. And that's where we learned to swim. Used to go across, swim in the waters across the street at Bay Street. In 1965, at the age of, I think it was 11 or 12, his mother was from Jamaica and married Sammy Isaacs, who was one of the first 6 members of Parliament for the PLP, elected in 1956. He served until 1962. He served served as a member of the British forces in Jamaica during the war, and married his mother there. She was from Trelawney. And in 1965, I got the opportunity to spend 12 weeks vacation in Jamaica in Trelawney, and got to know Jamaica quite intimately. Even learned how to hunt for crabs in the swamps, which I didn't learn here, so.
Kind of mix up.
Yeah, took a train. I think that was the year, I think it's 65 or 66. That was 66, it may have been. That was the year that the Commonwealth Games were held in Jamaica. Tommy Robinson and Harry Jerome ran against each other in what was then the 220-yard dash, which Tommy pulled up at the end of the race, and the Canadian won the race. But I'm just showing the connections between the two of us. I'm just, therefore, enormously proud as a member of his family for his accomplishment as President of the Court of Appeal. And in some senses, I can't believe that in our recent memory, two of us who were just running around in short pants are now actually leaders in a country which would have been basically unimaginable back in 66 or 65. And so on this occasion, I want to take the opportunity to congratulate him on his ascendancy to this job. And I'm certain he'll do a good job. And I understand he's getting married in August. Congratulations on that, too. And I wish him well in this new job. But to come more centrally to the bill, Madam President, there is a very ambitious legislative agenda which the PLP has. And I was really impressed last week when the Deputy Leader of Government Business in the House, Member of Parliament for Golden Gates, announced, or she was going over, how we're going to deal with the legislative business going forward, and how we're going to allocate the parliamentary time, particularly given the fact that the summer recess is coming, and what can we get in before that recess comes. And in addition to what is already listed here, which we have to get done, or hoping to get done, there's some things which the Foreign Ministry wants to get done. There's some amendments to the Parliamentary Service Act which have to get done. There's some legislation to formally incorporate the Progressive Liberal Party so that it separates its assets from those of its trustees. But the issue always is drafting. In order to get bills to this place, you need draftsmen. And the people who are responsible for drafting legislation are the law reform commissioners. So the more people we can get there, employed there, the better. And the people who have the skills to advance those things, the better. And that is why, one of the reasons why I'm happy to support this particular piece of legislation. And this has been a long-standing complaint, the question of drafting and getting legislation before Parliament. In fact, most of the Commonwealth parliaments have what they call a parliamentary draftsman person, so that, in fact, a draftsman works for Parliament. There's a whole department of draftspeople for the Parliament. And so drafting can actually take place if you need to make changes, and we're not making changes here on the fly. That, of course, will come in time. But I think it's important to explain some of these things to the public so that they get an understanding of what you actually face when you're trying to get things moved to the Parliament. One of the points I've made several times is a point which is not new to me, but which Michael Manley explained to me when he was talking about, in 1980, about why he had lost and the inability to complete their programs, had to do with whether or not the public administration can execute what the political level says they want to execute. So drafting is a part of that. You can make a decision as a cabinet that you want X piece of legislation, but that's got to be converted by a draftsperson into law, which actually comes before the Parliament, and it's got to make sense, particularly since member for St. Anne's will be going through it with a fine-tooth comb. So we have to be extremely careful that we have good draftsperson just for him. So the drafting is what this is about. And I'd also like to repeat something which, if you read our Constitution, which also explains how things get done. The Constitution gives the executive authority of the government to the cabinet. So the executive functions of the government are carried out by the cabinet. The cabinet acts by cabinet papers and a cabinet conclusion. And the cabinet conclusion is supposed to describe, in particular, what the public officials are to do. So very often, you will find that a permanent secretary who is in charge of running a department will not act on any policy initiative until they actually see what the cabinet ordered to be done. And the cabinet, as I said, the orders are listed in what is called a cabinet conclusion. And those cabinet conclusions have to be very particular in describing what actually needs to be done. On the foreign relations side, one of the reasons we have been so active in the Commonwealth is because there's something called the Commonwealth Fund for Technical Cooperation. And this has been one of the sources of getting technical expertise on trying to bring advanced legislation forward. So, for example, there's this fund in the Commonwealth. And if you have a problem on a specific issue, you can go to the Commonwealth Fund for Technical Cooperation. They often supply experts. They often supply draftspeople who will come in, do model legislation for you. So when it comes to the drafting people in Nassau, they basically take the model legislation and adapt it to the needs of the Bahamas. So that's one of the, again, one of the reasons why we continue to maintain our relationship with the Commonwealth bodies in its multilateral, in the multilateral context. Our founding fathers, in fact, made a commitment to multilateralism when they joined many of these organizations and said that the context of our foreign policy would be within the context of multilateralism. We have raised a concern with many of the developed countries they call the ABCs, and India has actually joined them, because this fund has been denuded and in fact defunded. And one hopes that by the lobbying that we've been doing over the last year or so, that refunding will take place for us, because this is an important aspect of what we need from that particular international body. And this comes then to the question of the Civil Aviation Authority and the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Amendment bills, where changes are being made to the law, which, if I read them correctly, would give the persons who have the executive functions in these bodies a certain level of independence with regard to the decisions they make, with regard to the conduct of our civil aviation. This is similar to provisions that were put in the law by previous governments about the central bank, where the governor of the central bank is able to make decisions independent of the political authority with regard to the monetary supply, the money supply. One of the things that happens on a regular, I'm sorry? Yes, right, that was your doing. One of the things that happens is that there's an audit which takes place of many of our facilities in the Bahamas, including, I think we've got 28 international airports, and all of them, is it? 28 international airports. I think they all have to pass a particular test if international air traffic, largely to the United States, is to be acceptable. And they have to have standards of how you of security, access, what actually gets on aircraft, those kinds of things. And of course, there's a similar thing for the ports. So the amendments to the legislation on the Civil Aviation Authority and the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Amendment Bill and the Civil Aviation Amendment Bill are all designed to comply with some of the tests and recommendations which have been made as a result of the audits by these international organizations. And it is therefore a convenient point to raise again why the government has such an active foreign policy role, because we need to be able to influence what happens in these international bodies as they set standards which will affect us in the Bahamas. And the Bahamas needs to have these standards if we are to continue to have the high level of commercial traffic and interchange which we have, particularly in our tourism sector. So that is the raison d'etre, so to speak, of these laws. Today, Madam Speaker, is the third day since the Parliamentary Service Act came into force. There was a statement last week which also announced the creation of the court services, the coming into force of the Court Services Act. Both of these acts are in pursuance of the fleshing out of our independence and the constitutional reform that we've been talking about for ages, which gives the Parliament some authority over its own affairs. This is something which many of us have been fighting for some time, and I'm looking forward to the execution of it, particularly as we come to the stage where the design of our new building is going to take place. I was downstairs just a few minutes ago, and I couldn't get any soap out of the dispenser because it's broken. So, you know, I said, there's another reason why we need a new building. So that is to come. But I want to, I only make that in the context of this. This morning, I looked in the gallery, and there were the faces of some people, young people, men and women, who looked to be about 16 or 17, I would guess. There was a time when I used to look like that. And I thought to myself, as I watched them there, some of them probably had on suits for the first time, and they're probably quite excited about sitting here in the gallery and looking at these people who actually run the country today. And they should know that one day that they will be here too. And so when I speak now, I want to make it clear that there's an explanation of how business is done and conducted, what the standards are of debate, the level of debate, and that members of Parliament bring to this business their individual consciences to be able to influence what happens in the country. So there are two roles of a member of Parliament. One is you can be a delegate, which means that for a particular constituency, you've come here to represent their views. Many people say that. But there's a second role, which is to bring your individual conscience to the business of government. And sometimes you exercise that as a delegate, and sometimes you exercise your individual conscience. But the two must come to government. And members of Parliament, Arthur Hanna used to always say this, our members are national politicians. They are parliamentarians for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, even though they are elected administratively for particular constituencies. We could have chosen another way. We could have gone proportional representation. You got to find some mechanism to get people into the House. And we chose to do first past the post, which is you have a constituency which you represent. But never forget that when you serve in this place, whether as a senator or as a member of Parliament, you are a national politician. And so the country is, so to speak, your bailiwick, and you bring your individual conscience to the fact, and you also bring to it the fact that you represent the views of those people in the constituency who elected you to office. So those are the few remarks I'd like to make in support of this. As I said, mainly I wanted to use this opportunity to congratulate John Isaacs on his appointment as President of the Court of Appeal. I've often wondered why he was overlooked for these top jobs in the past. I figured maybe it had something to do with the fact that his pa was a PLP representative, maybe, just saying. But an excellent judge.
Yes.
Sound decisions.
Yes.
And I have no doubt that going forward, he will defend the Constitution, uphold the laws of our country, and make our family and our country proud of those decisions which he makes. So congratulations to him again, and it's my privilege and honor to support these pieces of legislation. I've also had an update from Jamaica. They are in what appears to be in the middle of the storm, so to speak. The bulletin, which was posted this morning, indicates that they will be expecting the weather to subside at about 8 p.m. this evening. When I spoke to the Consul General a few minutes ago, she said lots of wind and rain, and the power has been off in many places, but basically they seem to be holding their own at this point. We'll keep monitoring the situation and seek to advise the House if there's any emergency. There are, as far as we know, 4 Bahamians who are still on the University of the West Indies campus. They've all been moved to one hall, which has power generation at the hall. So far, the Bahamians that we know of are safe, including 3 Bahamian citizens who are in a hotel in Montego Bay, which is on the north coast. The storm is actually going to pass along the southern coast, so the weather is less severe where those people are. But as I say, we'll continue to monitor the situation, and to the extent that we can provide information to the public, we shall. So thank you for this opportunity, and of course I support the pieces of legislation.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many?
Should be another government member. Go ahead.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise on behalf of the great people of Long Island. And Madam Speaker, I'm honored to yet again rise in this place to represent their interests. Madam Speaker, the bills in question today, particularly those that relate to the Civil Aviation Authority, Bahamas, they're merely being amended. I do not believe the bills themselves are controversial at all. And I believe that the bills lend to the protection of the aviation industry. I hope it would, that as we move forward, we would look to expand the aircraft registry in the Bahamas, much in the way that we have a pretty large ship registry in the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, for the most part, as I said earlier, some mere amendments. Madam Speaker, I do believe, though, that we should look at establishing in future independent ministry to deal with regulations or regulatory agencies, like the Civil Aviation Authority, where this would avoid ministry conflicts. For example, say, for example, there's a ministry, the regulators attached to that ministry, and then an entity that the regulator oversees or regulates is also attached to that industry. So I think it would be good in future, maybe a future ministry, to see we don't have any rails, so air, transport, maritime, maybe all merged together. So, and then of course maybe another ministry where a grouping of sister authorities, like the authorities that govern air transport, et cetera, et cetera. Madam Speaker, I've heard a lot here today about runways and inspection of runways and so on and so forth. And I know what it is to have a runway that is not in the best condition as the one in my constituency. And I'm hopeful that as we progress, that the runway in my constituency would be, well, Deadmanski. Stella Mars, as you would be aware, Angleton, had some works done, I think during your, it might have been your first term as transport minister. Stella Mars is still holding pretty good. It was pretty smooth. The only issue with Stella Morris would be that if it was longer, you could get larger aircraft coming in. But in terms of Deadmanski is too short. The runway is really gritty and not in the best condition. And in addition to terminal leading work, and I'm going to come to that, the runway itself is not in the best condition. When you land, if you've been to Long Island, Madam Speaker, in Bahamas here, and I'm sure my good friend from Exuma can speak to this, when they come down, I don't know, they have to start holding that plane together immediately. The member for Tall Pine, what's your constituency? Pinewood. My brother over there from Pinewood and I sat on the side of each other going to the regatta. And when the plane came down Bahamas Air, both of us were kind of holding on to that seat as we were pressing brake. You know when you drive, you're pressing your own brakes. So the runway is too short and the condition is not good. You can actually feel everything. And I don't think there's anyone who would deny that. Madam Speaker, so maintenance of these runways and airports, we certainly would like to see greater maintenance going forward. I do support increasing the autonomy of CAB. I think that is what this bill seeks to provide, making it a bit more independent from other government agencies, authorities, or influence. Because we all know, Madam Speaker, expanding the inspection authority of aircraft operators, is urgently needed. I've seen at least 2 videos in recent time, 2 separate videos, over the last few months, of a plane door flying open, or the last one was the emergency hatch flying open during flight. Yes.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma.
There were some erroneous information posted in relation to an airline and the emergency door flying open, etc. That was determined not to be correct. The matter was investigated, and it occurred that the emergency door was open on the ground by a passenger. So that was erroneous, and I think sometimes to protect the integrity of the traveling public, the integrity of these airlines serving the traveling public, I invite the media to be more discerning about what they carry, what they pick up from social media, and carry without confirmation from the relevant authority or for giving the airline itself a call to say, hey, tell me what happened. So I think there's some level of irresponsible reporting built into this, and I wouldn't want to put that on the record of the House, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member.
Thank you, Exuma, for that clarification. So in this instance, the emergency hatch was opened by a passenger on the ground. However, there was another instance, and I believe this one was actually true, where the plane door opened mid-flight, which is really unacceptable and entirely ridiculous. Madam Speaker, we all know, well, those of us who have an understanding of, or who do some research, the engines of planes, there's so much hours that they can run for before you have to take them in to maintenance. And those responsible operators usually fly their planes to the States. I know people like Joel Fries and Marty Fox and those, or to Long Island, they fly to the States and they put their planes in maintenance a week, 2 weeks, get the engines upgraded, changed, etc. So, ensuring that aircraft operators are constantly updating and maintaining the aircraft before having persons come on board, I think this bill could lend to that. I'm hopeful of that because we have seen a lot of slackness. We've seen a lot of slackness. We often hear about planes coming from there's one particular island, Madam Speaker, where, there's a running joke that even children fly. And you know the island I'm talking about. Madam Speaker, I do think that there's a need for updating of some licenses. I was told recently, over the last week or two, by a pilot, that there are some operators in the Bahamas who have private pilot's licenses, but they are charging and flying people across the islands without having been rated to operate as commercial pilots. So if you have a private pilot's license, you can fly yourself and your family and your friends, but you cannot fly people, charge them, and run a commercial operation. That is something that has to be tightened on, and there's a number of persons doing that out there. There's a need for more random checks. So, Madam Speaker, I believe that we should move towards establishing, as we set up legislation like this, establishing an aviation think tank, which would be needed to review tariffs and fees and the impact of these fees on consumers, because every time I look around, tickets going up and up and up. I could go to Florida cheaper than I could go home to Long Island. That's ridiculous. And it's right in the Bahamas. For me to go home, I have to pay $300. I can go to Florida for less than that. We have to do something about inter-island travel and the cost to travel within our country, particularly by air, because the prices are ridiculous. They're getting out of hand. Soon enough, I'll have to, at this rate, because I think it's been increasing now for the last few years. If it gets to $400 or $500, that's almost a flight to the UK. Almost. That's right. An economy.
Not the way it's just.
An economy, the way the average man travels. And so, Madam Speaker, there's some pilots who tell me about how they move around the Bahamas. Tell me, say, man, we move like bats in the air, right? Say, we call, say, for example, you call the member for Exuma. Hey, man, I'm at this location. You give your coordinates. He gives his coordinates. They send out something and say, hey, where are you at the moment? They're pinging off each other. This is what pilots actually tell me, how they fly around at a certain height in this country, particularly when you get further south, because I think air traffic control in NASA only extends to a certain point. Once you move further down, you have to be pinging off the different towers and pinging off the different airlines who are flying around you at the same or similar altitude. Madam Speaker, when it comes to as relates to overflight fees, how much do we get? What are we doing with those fees? I heard that international airlines are complaining about paying fees to us when we purportedly pay none to the U.S. government, who continues to handle our airspace about 5,000 feet. Don't get me wrong, Madam Speaker. 6,000 feet. Don't get me wrong, Madam Speaker. I don't think that's any of their business. And they should pay to use our airspace. However, given that we are not paying the U.S. side to monitor our airspace, and they are instead sending funds to us, how much are we getting every year? And what are we doing with those funds? Have we ever thought to set up a special purpose vehicle for funds obtained from overflight fees for the development of the industry? Maybe a percentage to be allocated to education or cultural initiatives, etc. I've always seen the consolidated fund as a bit of a black hole where you collect all this money from all these different islands, all these different agencies, and then we dump all the fees and taxes into one pot. Honestly speaking, even at law firms, we have different accounts for different things. You have your client account, your operating account, and your different accounts for various outgoings and incomings. And so I think perhaps we should look at how we can best effect constitutional change to better the current situation. Because as I said, the consolidated fund is a black hole. Madam Speaker, you know, for me, for us in Long Island, the airport has been a sore point for some time. We desperately need airlift into the island. The airport has hindered, or the lack of a decent first world international airport where we could receive direct flights from the US and the UK and elsewhere, has hindered our progress, our development, has stymied our economic growth. And we see every year Long Islanders, they graduate, they depart, they go to college, they move to Nassau, and some of them never come back. They may come for a regatta or Christmas, but they never come back because, you know, there are very little opportunities on the island. And some of that has to do with the lack of that airport, which could really stimulate the economy and jumpstart the economic engine in ways that we have not yet seen. We are industrious people, Madam Speaker, but industrious people need help as well. And we can get that airport. That will put us on a path towards higher heights, you know, towards achieving some of the success that we see in the Exumas and Eleuthris and Abaco. You know, so we're hopeful, Exuma, that we're able to get that airport and what that airport means for us. Madam Speaker, you know, I have a special affinity for Bahamas Air. Firstly, I want to commend Tanya Pratt. Tanya's a friend, the chairwoman of Bahamas Air, and also Tracy Cooper. You know, over the years, I found him to be quite accommodating. I want to see Bahamas Air expand its routes. We have the capacity, the ability to do so. I want to see us expand to more international markets. Right now, Bahamas Air, and I say this without fair or favor, Bahamas Air is the leading regional airline, #1. Okay? And I think there's been rating of regional airlines, and we've beaten out Caribbean Airlines as well. And Caribbean Airlines is pretty good, but we've beaten them out on a number of occasions. But greater regional connectivity between the Bahamas and other countries within the Caribbean would be welcome, and I think we could use Bahamas Air to help facilitate that, to make that happen. Madam Speaker, I grew up loving Bahamas Air. I'm a huge fan of it. So whenever and wherever I travel, I always choose them first. There's no greater comfort than when you're aboard a Bahamas Air flight. You got a sense of pride, national pride, but also you're comfortable knowing their superb safety record, which is perhaps one of the best in the world. And so, we all know that Bahamas Air has well-trained, highly experienced, excellent pilots.
They don't just fly here.
They don't just fly here, Madam Speaker. They live here. So they have a greater sense of responsibility to us, because as we say, there's one of we. Madam Speaker, I think it was this morning, or last night or this morning, I read a report that RBC was increasing bank fees. How these banks lost their minds? Every time you look around, they are trying to extract more and more and more from the Bahamian consumer. How much of this can the public take? And when will the government step in and move to put a stop to this? I just read an article, Madam Speaker, which stated, and I want to quote the article, said, Royal Bank of Canada has informed its customers that starting July 31st, a fee of 50 cents will be applied per declined transaction for other bank ATM transactions within the country and purchases at points of sale. So watch this now, Madam Speaker. Let me be clear. And this is from their own notice. The bank, that's RBC, they are telling Bahamian consumers, that if you have insufficient funds in your account, they can charge you. Although they can see you don't have nothing there. So you have nothing there, and they charge you 50 cents for having nothing there. Imagine that. And then, watch this part, Madam Speaker. If you go into McDonald's or Wendy's or Bamboo Shack. Madam Speaker, you look like you was eating at some Greek restaurants, though. But if you want to go, Madam Speaker, and make any point of sale purchase for whatever, and you put in the wrong PIN, right, in your debit card, Madam Speaker, let's say you put in the wrong PIN and your card declined as a result of that. You go to BAF, go to pay your insurance, and you put in a 6, and you're supposed to put in a 9. You know they sometimes scramble the numbers on the credit card, on the card machine anyway. If you miss and do that, Madam Speaker, and it declines, they charge you 50 cents for that. That is ludicrous and unacceptable. Unacceptable. The same applies, Madam Speaker, if a Bahamian is making a point of sale purchase, making online purchases at Amazon or one of those places, and somehow you end up going over your daily limit. I think some banks have a daily limit of $2,500 a day or $3,500 a day. Some are $1,500. If you go over that daily limit, so let's say, Madam Speaker, your daily limit is $1,500. You buy something and everything comes up to $1,550, right? You're gonna be charged 50 cents for going over your daily limit. How can this foolishness possibly be allowed? I call upon the central bank to intervene. Just this past March, the central bank released its analysis of commercial bank fees, and it showed that there were varying and different costs per bank for deposit accounts, credit card transactions, digital transactions, and so on. The central bank must put caps on these fees. The central bank must cause banks to remove certain fees. The central bank must better regulate these practices where banks are popping up with random fees to extract more and more money from our people. At some point, Madam Speaker, it must be realized that you cannot overwhelm people's finances and that you simply cannot get blood from stone. Now, Madam Speaker, I want to pivot here a bit. I saw a news clip with the member for South, Andrews and Mangrove Key, talking about reverse osmosis plants procured by WSC on Monday. I was not present when he spoke. I found his comments almost laughable and most disappointing. He misled the House, Madam Speaker, and one wonders if this was done intentionally. This is a member, Madam Speaker, that I often talk sports with, who could actually ask me a question and I would have assisted with it. And so and who I've recently heard make very personal and crass comments from his seat. Madam Speaker, let me speak to this. I heard talk about investigations, which I welcome. Madam Speaker, while people on islands like Eleuthera can't bathe, can't wash their dishes, the member's time to come in here and go on the attack. He's attacking the wrong people, and he should focus on the solution. Fix the problem that he's been elected to resolve. No one wants to hear stories about people now elected and being stuck in a time capsule. Madam Speaker, when the former government determined that we would seek to secure our water resources and seek to no longer be exploited by foreign companies who bring in used RO machines, pull water from our well fields, make WSC pay for the electricity and the consumables, and so on under poorly drawn 25-year contracts that we observe were expiring, certain decisions were taken. We went to Cabinet and made a presentation to Cabinet. And everyone was at the Cabinet, as we presented there, we were accompanied by the board, general manager, persons like John Boleg, and other members of the technical team. And I'm happy to provide that presentation to the member for South Andrews and Mangrove Key. Madam Speaker, WSC also went into the marketplace, pursuing the government's policy at the time. The government sought, firstly though, to purchase contracts, the contracts currently in operation, from the company Aqua Design. However, to be frank, they were greedy and they sought a price per plant some $1 million or so per plant. That was much more than it should have cost. And these were machines that are 20 and 25 years old. And Madam Speaker, I'll table that quote. I undertake to do so, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, meetings were held with a number of foreign companies and operators to, one, see how build, own, operate, and transfer contracts could be arranged in future, including with Aqua Design. And two, purchase RO plants at concessionary rates. Interestingly, Madam Speaker, many of the persons involved in those talks have either been retired or recruited by the very companies that WSC was seeking to get out from under. In fact, Madam Speaker, WSC on one occasion issued requests for proposals for various plants. I heard, when you're talking about a no-bid contracts. That's not true. Mr. Cyprian Gibson, who's now the Deputy General Manager, who at the time had oversight of the Family Island operations, can speak to that, as he knows of it and drew many of the proposals. Madam Speaker, to my knowledge, in seeking to obtain and meet this policy position that the government put to us, which was then also agreed by WSC's board, WSC, and I've seen the meeting minutes, I was not in those meetings, met with Suez and Aqua Design. Well, Suez was at the time the parent company of Aqua Design. I think it's now owned by Viola. And they met with a company out of France called Fluence. They met with a Danish company called Accept, whose local representative was Mr. Philip, or is Mr. Philip Whitehead. They met with Mr. David Hawker, who was the owner of Watermakers, was a long-time supplier of water for WSC and the owner of the Staniel Key Yacht Club and Makers Air. They met with Forever Pure. They met with a company called Advanced. They met with a company called I Water and Power. And Madam Speaker, proposals were gotten from many of them. I was doing some looking around today to find some of those proposals, Madam Speaker. I've been able to put my hands on a few. And so, Madam Speaker, I undertake to also table those. Madam Speaker, my advice was, at the time, I was advised that all these companies had different approaches to what was to be obtained and different price points. In fact, a number of them I know had submitted proposals to WSC. As it relates to the reverse osmosis position that was taken by the government, that was supported by various reports from the Water and Sewage Corporation. There was a report by Ms. Diane Saunders that we will table, Mr. John Boleg, we will table, a consultant, an international consultant by the name of Mr. Nikolay Vuchkov. I think he's now working in Saudi Arabia, that I will table. Anthony Boswick wrote a report that I will table. So did Mr. Philip Benaby. I will also table that. And then there were various other proposals. Madam Speaker, secondly, I'm well aware that before we left office, 5 reverse osmosis plants, at least 5, were delivered. One was installed in Saudi Lutra at the Waterford site. One was installed and operational in Moores Island. It was operational. That was when that contract ended with Aqua Design. That was overtaken. WSC runs that. That came off WSC's books. WSC owns that plant now in Moores Island. One was installed for operations in Inagua. What is most interesting, though, is I have been reliably informed that the member for South Andrews and Mangrove has had this plant in Inagua uprooted, and I am told shipped to Andrews. One was also installed for operations in San Salvador. One was installed for operations in Long Island. It was visited by myself and the then Prime Minister and former Deputy Prime Minister and many of the WSC technical team and leaders. To my knowledge, Madam Speaker, that was to go online when we demitted office, or when we were booted out of office, if you want to say it that way. Madam Speaker, 2 reserve plants were also left at the site of the New Providence operation. One was acquired from Watermakers. I think that was 100,000 gallons, and that was a plant that was set to be moved around the country in the instance that a hurricane came. and damaged some installation, you can take that plant and drop it anywhere on the affected island, put it immediately into operation, and people could get water. And then there was a second plant that was obtained from the very company that the state minister derided. And Madam Speaker, I saw the clip. I was informed today by the persons who did the installations that the electrical side had not been installed, and it was supposed to be installed on all these plants when we got out of office. However, I understand that those works were stopped upon this government being elected. So when I hear the members saying that the plants are not working, how would he know? What does he mean they weren't working? Madam Speaker, I cannot speak for the relationship with what the relationship with the manufacturer became after we were booted from office. I also cannot speak about whether those who came after were negligent in their duties to follow up and liaise with any party who WSC executed contracts with. But once the bell rang, Madam Speaker, I cleared my office, and the member for Fort Charlotte to tell you that I would have told him, and I had a conversation that my office was long cleared. Madam Speaker, once we lost, I put WSC in the rear view and sought to get on with private practice. Alas, that was not to be. So, Madam Speaker, to say that some money was spent and paid to a manufacturer and nothing was delivered is simply untrue. You do not just call big numbers to trigger Bahamians. Bahamians are not that gullible and easy to manipulate. Madam Speaker, the former government had a plan to take over and run the reverse osmosis plants once those contracts expired, freeing itself of the likes of Aqua Design and others, freeing the Bahamian people, such as the people of Eleuthera, from being subjected to threats to shut off their water and other threats to disconnect water supply from the source for some small balance. To do so, Madam Speaker, a unit was tasked with forming the RO position, which Mr. Boss contributed to, with the operations of the RO machines, and with the administration of existing RO contracts. A number of engineers were recruited specifically for this unit, in addition to external technical consultants, such as Mr. Nikolay Wuchkov and Anton, I can't remember Anton's last name. But it had a hydrologist among the members, other technical folks, and liaised closely with other WSC departments and teams in an effort to pursue and achieve its mandate. So, Madam Speaker, I recall the last government giving short-term and 6-month extensions to allow WSC teams to get to the point of completing their installation and testing of these plants. And one of the hiccups was that Aqua Design, Madam Speaker, get this piece, Madam Speaker, Aqua Design wanted to sell water and sewage to wells that were drilled on WSC land. Imagine that. And so, are you impugning the character of persons such as members who were in the RO unit and technical leaders like Ricky Roll and those who installed these plants? These are people who inspected, installed, and tested these plants. In fact, there's a young man, but a young engineer, Michael Cooper, who spent time in the States being trained by the same manufacturer who was spoken of. He was trained to build the plants. And guess what, Madam Speaker? Aqua Design snatched him from water and sewage. Michael Cooper was in the States with an immersion course. And then there was Sweeting Ski, Madam Speaker. That plant was purchased by Water and Sewage, upgraded, and Water and Sewage took over the operations there, hired the operator that was used by the previous person or previous operator. And I believe she's still on Water and Sewage staff. Madam Speaker, the company
The chair recognizes
was the point of order.
the honorable member for South and Central Andros.
Yes, Madam Speaker. I just need clarification from the member. He said that I misled the House, but he did not speak about the specific plants that were purchased from Pure, the company out of California. He didn't speak specifically to that. He spoke about the cabinet presentation, about the reverse osmosis, switching to it. That's fine. But we needed him to speak specifically to what I spoke about, what he spoke about earlier that morning, the plants what were purchased from the company in California. Thank you.
Madam Speaker,
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Madam Speaker, I believe I did just that. In fact, Madam Speaker, I stated that a number of companies had submitted proposals, and this entity Forever Pure, is one such entity that submitted a proposal, right? And I undertake, Madam Speaker, to table that as well. I want to lay all this. Madam Speaker, this entity, so there were plans purchased from water makers as well as this company. We left, Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for South and Central Andros.
Spoke specifically about these plants that were purchased from that company, and he still hasn't said what I misled the House about. I said that we got plants and we still paid deposits for 2, and we did not get them up until the point when he said they demitted office. But to that point, the corporation still can't get in contact with this company. He said this company provided a proposal in order to run stations. The company only provided the equipment to water and sewage. So if he has direct contact with this company, which in the corporation has only one set of contacts and it's not working, he could provide it. He could lay that for the House also. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Madam Speaker, that's cute, but don't you dare. Let me say this, Madam Speaker. This company, I don't know these people. That's the first thing. Secondly, Madam Speaker, I never said in this place, and this is where he's misled, I never said in this place that that company offered a proposal to run any plant for water and sewage. I said that they offered a proposal for water and sewage to purchase plants from them, which is water and sewage, which is what, my brother, you should have listened. You should have listened. You should do a better job at listening. Water and sewage purchase plants from them as well as water makers. That is what I said, Madam Speaker. When we left office, Madam Speaker, water and sewage had already received, I think I listed them, about 5 or 6 plants, which were installed, some of them, and some of them were at New Providence operations.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for South.
You have to state your point of
What
order.
I don't want the member for Long Island to do is mislead the House by not speaking about the 2 plants that we paid deposits for. I want to know his knowledge on that. He could sign. Yes.
Madam Speaker, I'm going to respond to him. Firstly, Madam Speaker, I'm not involved in the technical side of this. Secondly, Madam Speaker, I am aware that a number of plants were ordered from this company as well as the other company. Some were delivered when I demitted office. I cannot speak to what happened after I demitted. Some were, I think 2 or 3 were on order, but I can only speak to what was delivered and what I know of during my tenure. What I can say, Madam Speaker, is I do know that there were plants ordered by the Water and Sewage Corporation, and some of the Water and Sewage Corporation was waiting to take delivery on 1 or 2 of them at the time that we demitted office. I can speak to nothing else that happened after we demitted office. Okay? And Madam Speaker, I want to note, Madam Speaker, and I hear this member talking about, and by the way, we went through an extensive process, Madam Speaker. I'm going to wrap up right now, Madam Speaker. I'm going to wrap up. We went through an extensive recruitment process, Madam Speaker, to get personnel and engineers with oral experience and engage an internationally renowned consultant to meet the government's mandate. And Madam Speaker, I hear this member here talking about using threats with investigations and so on.
Which one?
The member for South Andros and Mango Key. He is free to do that. He's free to do that, Madam Speaker. He's free to do that, you know? But I want to say something, Madam Speaker. I have no...
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for South and Central Andros.
Spoke about the presentation made to Cabinet. I just wanted to know if these purchases made to this company was passed through Cabinet or whether it was passed through the board. So he could speak on that. He was there when it was first signed. So he could speak on that to see where the authorization for the purchases came.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Madam Speaker, I thought it was, I don't know, it was question time, but I'll answer him. Madam Speaker, firstly, these purchases were approved by the board, and the government did approve the purchases. Okay? We did get approval from the government to make these purchases. Excuse me, you do not, excuse me, Madam Speaker, I'd like to be able to finish my contribution, Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for South and Central.
Madam Speaker, I just need clarification for the public. He said the government. I wanted to know if it was the cabinet, where we would have a cabinet conclusion. He's laying a lot of papers. I could lay that for him. And the board has papers also that he could come and lay with this conclusion on these purchases from this company in California. So I just wanted to state on record that yes, this was something done by the board, and also it passed through cabinet, so then he could come and lay those papers for us.
Which cabinet?
Former cabinet.
Well, former cabinet, okay.
Madam Speaker, firstly, as I indicated, the government, the Prime Minister at the time, former minister, they're well aware. We made a presentation to the cabinet. I would not have a cabinet paper. I don't sit in cabinet. But I can tell you, Madam Speaker, that the board certainly approved of it. Okay? The board certainly approved of it. And Madam Speaker, all of these purchases, Madam Speaker, this member is not even allowing me to answer his own question.
Chair recognizes the honourable member for South.
I just want to put on the record that this member is stating that a $1.9 million purchase was just authorized by the board and not by cabinet. Is that what we're hearing from you today?
Madam Speaker, firstly, let me establish that the Water and Sewage Corporation Act does not apply any limit to a board, firstly. Secondly, Madam Speaker, as I stated to the member, the government of the Bahamas at the time, and the Prime Minister and the then Deputy could probably speak more to it, would have given authorization for this to be done. I am happy to table any information that I have concerning it. I can also say, Madam Speaker, that the board of the Water and Sewage Corporation would have approved and supported the position. And Madam Speaker, let me be clear. I cannot speak to this 1.9 million that he's talking about. I know that these plants were purchased individually over a period of time, and there were different proposals. There were different proposals, Madam Speaker. There were different proposals received from multiple companies with respect to these plants. Multiple companies.
What kind of plants are we talking about?
These are reverse osmosis plants, Madam Speaker.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, reverse osmosis plants. And so, Madam Speaker, as I said earlier, the members, I heard him in here talking about investigations. He's free to do that. He's free to do that, Madam Speaker. We often hear threats coming from that side about investigations and seeking to criminalize people who otherwise have no criminal records. Even targeting one's family, Madam Speaker. We note that the Registrar General bill is soon to be tabled. And I know myself and the opposition on that occasion will tell a personal story about victimization and blatant attempts to injure and destroy my family. We are going to publicly address that in short order, and we hope that the Attorney General will be here then. Madam Speaker, he knows of what I speak. Madam Speaker, Long Island supports the amendments. And Madam Speaker, I'm happy to bring clarification to what this member said, and I'm prepared, Madam Speaker, as I said, I undertake to table that which I have stated here today. I will do so at the next sitting of the House, because unfortunately I don't have all of the documents here with me today due to a printing mishap. So at the next sitting, Madam Speaker, I shall do so.
Thank you,
Madam
honourable
Speaker.
member. The chair recognizes the honourable member for South and Central Andhra.
Madam Speaker, just so the public is not misled, the only limit that the board has, according to their corporate governance, what was approved in the 2007 to 2012 Hubert Ingram's government, is for 250,000, Madam Speaker. Or anything over that, 250,000, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honourable member.
Yes. Madam Speaker, the Water and Sewage Corporation is governed by an act. Okay? The Interpretation and General Clauses Act is clear. He could read one with the other. Right? that is not in the Water and Sewage Corporation Act. And I suggest that you get yourself a copy of the act and read it. Section 7, I think it is, or 6 and 7. Get a copy of the act.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Asmani?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Chair recognizes the Honorable Member.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise again on behalf of the good people of St. Barnabas, Madam Speaker. Yes, yes, you can speak after me. Thank you. Just grateful to Almighty God, Madam Speaker, for the grace that God continues to provide for me, despite my imperfections in all of my various capacities. But I work diligently on my knees and in my consciousness, Madam Speaker, to be better than I was yesterday and better than I was even an hour ago, Madam Speaker. And obviously for all of us, we will continue on that journey for the rest of our lives, Madam Speaker. Again, Madam Speaker, it's a privilege as well to be a citizen of the greatest country in the world, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and all that embodies within the Bahamian people, and all that is promised for us by our Creator. Madam Speaker, I don't intend to be very, very long, Madam Speaker. I don't intend to be very, very long. But I just want to share a few thoughts on these very important pieces of legislation, Madam Speaker. Before I do so, Madam Speaker, I made a commitment to my daughters, who just graduated from university, and they said, you know, Daddy, sometimes y'all only talk about Bahamians on certain occasions. I need to talk about the great accomplishments of Bahamians more, especially those of you, Daddy like you, who are in Parliament, that has this larger platform, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, for the foreseeable future, and as long as God gives me breath, I will attempt to, every time I make a contribution in this House, Madam Speaker, to highlight ever so briefly Bahamians who have achieved great excellence, who've been great pioneers, particularly in those industries, Madam Speaker, that relate to the bill we are debating, so that I can hold fast to that commitment to my daughters, as well as humbly and hopefully bring some edification or just reaffirm, Madam Speaker. You know, Madam Speaker, I believe that that is vitally important to our development as a country, Madam Speaker. I'm minded every time I come in the House, and I say this sincerely, and I have to preface my remark because, you know, sometimes politics you can be so jaded with politics, you confuse people's motivation. But every time I come in the House and I see the member for Angleton, for example, I'm reminded, and we ought to be reminded, Madam Speaker, that as Bahamians, the member for Angleton now is the longest serving female member of Parliament in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And, yes, and she should be commended for that, Madam Speaker, and I say that sincerely. So, Madam Speaker, we're here to debate these compendium of bills, Madam Speaker. And I just wish to highlight, four persons, Madam Speaker. The first being Albert E. Forsythe, Madam Speaker. Albert E. Forsythe. And he was born on Fowler Street and later attended McGill University in Canada. Dr. Forsythe was known as a Bahamian pioneer in aviation. And it says here that with Dr. Forsythe at the wheel and under the headlights of local cars, that he landed a plane on solid ground here in Nassau in 1934. And they make sure to say until then, only seaplanes flew into the Bahamas. And it has been said that Forsythe on that flight had helped to develop air tourism to the West Indies. And in fact, Madam Speaker, chapter of Black Pilots of America is named in his honor, a Bahamian, Madam Speaker. And Dr. Forsythe was inducted into the Smithsonian Air Museum and has been honored by the U.S. Post Office, Madam Speaker. That is, Madam Speaker, Bahamian pilot Dr. Albert Forsythe, Madam Speaker. Additionally, Madam Speaker, would like to recognize today and remember today and honor today Captain Francis Smith, Captain Gwendolyn Ritchie, and Captain Gail Sanders, who are all the first female captains to work for our national flag carrier, Bahamas Air, in its 40-year history. And so we salute those women and Dr. Forsythe, who are Bahamians, who would have again illuminated the corridors of Bahamian history in the aviation sector. Madam Speaker, the member for Exuma, Madam Speaker, started off his presentation this morning. I thought he was on a good wicket, Madam Speaker. And then he made the statement that we don't want no slopping up in here today. That's what he said? You don't want no slopping up in here today. That's what he said, no slopping up in here today. And so, Madam Speaker, the honorable member did in fact do some slopping up that I wish to address, Madam Speaker. Well, some people say truth. He said slopping up, he didn't say truth. Oh, he spoke truth, okay. Madam Speaker. And I just for the record, Madam Speaker, this recent discourse, if you will, Madam Speaker, about our tourism numbers, Madam Speaker, and on how the leader of the opposition, the member for Marcos City's comments were mischaracterized, in our view, Madam Speaker, relative to the tourism numbers and stopover visitors versus cruise ship passengers, and the fact that we are all elated. We were all elated even at the lunch break when you walk downtown and you see the number of tourists here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas here in our country. That is always a good thing, Madam Speaker, always a good thing. And anybody who says otherwise, that it's not a good thing, is being irresponsible, Madam Speaker. And so I think that's not the question. I think for all of us, the question is, how do we make our tourism product better? That's something we all want. How do we make our tourism product better? And the member for Marcos City, as has been the case, as I said earlier, the member for Exuma, in his capacity as Minister of Tourism, and on past occasions in this House, even when he was in opposition, talked about how do we increase, Madam Speaker, how do we increase those persons, those tourists that spend more monies, Madam Speaker, even though we are grateful of every tourist that comes to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for however long, Madam Speaker. How do we, in terms of our tourism product, increase that high-valued spender, if you will, Madam Speaker. And it is a legitimate question. It isn't anything to play politics with. It is something that I'm sure the professionals at the Ministry of Tourism, they are thinking about every day, Madam Speaker. So that's not to diminish what we have done or what's even in play, but it is something that we must constantly be focusing on, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I read for you here, Madam Speaker, article from the Bahamas Hotel Association from Sandy Sands, just talking to the Bahamas must target 70% cruise visitor ratio, and that, you know, right now that ratio is too low. All right, and I don't have to read the article. Obviously, Sandy Sands, obviously, his reputation precedes him. But the point is that how do we do that, Madam Speaker? And even the issue of capacity, the member for Exuma talked about in the 24-25 budget about us being our country, needing some 15,000 rooms. And so, yeah, I mean, the question of capacity is always a question. I don't know. The Atlantis Beach Tower has been shuttered for a while. I don't know if it's opening up. And so, what are the plans for us to increase capacity, Madam Speaker? And Madam Speaker, you know, it is something that we must constantly address. Over the last 35 years, Madam Speaker, our stopover, and I stand to be corrected, has increased by 35%, but in places like Jamaica, it's 288% in the last 33 years. Cuba, 500%, Dominican Republic, 1,000%. So it is a legitimate question that we should continue to encourage each other, to support the professionals whose job it is to figure out how do we get more of certain types of visitors to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, right? How do we make travel to the family islands or the destinations of our family islands even more attractive to get more visitors? All of this, I'm sure, is a part of the strategy or strategies at the Ministry of Tourism, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, also of note, you know, I constantly hear this refrain about the members on this side who are members of Parliament for Grand Bahama, and you hear the refrain, it was 5 of them, and what didn't happen, and essentially, and paraphrasing here, that they let Grand Bahama down, Madam Speaker. But I find it fascinating, Madam Speaker, that the member for Exuma, Madam Speaker, as he stands up to push that refrain, Madam Speaker, the first thing he should do, Madam Speaker, is apologize to the people of Grand Bahama. He should apologize to the people of Grand Bahama and let one of his other colleagues probably articulate that refrain, because he was the one that spoke about this Grand Lucayan deal, Madam Speaker, that what was supposed to be the foundation of the Renaissance and change of the Grand Bahamian economy. That's what it was heralded as. That's what it was, and Grand Bahamians were hopeful. Even the members on this side, I'm sure if you talk to them, they were hopeful too, especially that the government canceled the deal before, but they said that Grand Bahama was going to be grand again, that the magic was coming back, that this was part of the overall vision and anchoring of the economy, the Grand Bahamian economy, a new Grand Bahama. But the member for Exuma who came into this, he came into Parliament, Madam Speaker, came into the Parliament on the government's website. DPM Cooper tables communication on the sale of Grand Lucayan in the House of Assembly. And there's a quote here, said, not only does Electra have a plan for the resort, but it has a vision for its future in Grand Bahama that includes the growth of the overall economy and community. Madam Speaker. So the government, as a part of their platform and vision for, again, transforming Grand Bahama, had at its very foundation the sale of this hotel, Madam Speaker. But yet, Madam Speaker, yeah, you keep on hearing it's still coming. The point is, it has not come, Madam Speaker. It's not come. And maybe before the member gets up and berate the members opposite, he needs to apologize to Grand Bahama, the people of Grand Bahama, that we are sorry, that I am sorry, that we have let you down, that we have not yet fulfilled that promise, Madam Speaker. And then, Madam Speaker, I'm sure you can have now a real debate about what's happening in Grand Bahama and what should be happening, Madam Speaker. They also promised, Madam Speaker, the member for Exuma promised $1 billion in investments, Madam Speaker. East Grand Bahama was $1 billion? $2 billion, okay. Right, $2 billion, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I'm just a humble man giving humble advice to the member for Exuma. Let one of his colleagues get up and talk about Grand Bahama first before he gets up, because he has some apologizing to do to the people of Grand Bahama, because the very foundational piece of policy has yet to be realized in Grand Bahama, Madam Speaker. Sorry? Madam Speaker, also, Madam Speaker, talking about civil aviation, as was expressed earlier, Madam Speaker, the Bahamian people still have some questions about the $2.5 million plane, Madam Speaker. The $2.5 million plane, Madam Speaker, that the member for South and Central Andros said when we were in committee, said that the $2.5 million acquisition, that was the line item, said that it was for the procurement of a plane. Now, obviously, since then, some persons laugh and say, oh, how could you buy a plane for $2.5 million? The member for East Grand Bahama stood up and asked, well, actually, let me just backtrack 2 steps. It said that this was being purchased for government officials, civil servants to travel around the country for work purposes, Madam Speaker. That was the reason. The member for East Grand Bahama got up and asked, so let's be clear, this is not Bahamas Air purchasing a plane. He said, no. We asked questions about the type, all sort of additional questions about the acquisition of this plane. It was never said at that time that this was a confiscated plane. The member for South and Central Andros said he would get back to us, Madam Speaker. Since that time, Madam Speaker, we've heard so many variations of what this plane is for, so many variations, Madam Speaker. So the Bahamian people would like to know, since we now hear that it is a confiscated plane that changes the original communication of what was communicated and how the plane was going to be acquired. We also now hear all these different reasons for how the utilization, what's the utilization plan of the plane. There's so many different reasons, Madam Speaker. There's so many different versions of things, explanations, Madam Speaker. The member for Freetown, the Minister of National Security, who said that it's for firefighters, it's for surveillance of our borders, who also said that, sometimes you have to put a gurney on plane and to help people who have emergency travel. He didn't even know, Madam Speaker, that the line item wasn't even in his budget. But he told the media it was in the national security budget, Madam Speaker. But the member didn't even know it was in the Ministry of Finance budget, in the capital expenditure, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, it's a simple question about clearing up how will the plane be used? What is the story behind the acquisition of the plane, Madam Speaker? And again, the member for South and Central Andrews told the Parliament that he would be back to give us the correct information, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's a lot of talk today, understandably so, Madam Speaker, about airports. We know, Madam Speaker, that our country is fortunate to have a lot of absolute advantages, Madam Speaker, in our sun, our sand, and our sea, and our geography, where we are, Madam Speaker. And so what we obviously do and want to do is continue to work on the competitive advantages, those things that we can work on to ultimately continue to separate us from the rest of the world, Madam Speaker. And so as it relates, Madam Speaker, to the aviation sector, Madam Speaker, these are very important regulations because we want to make sure that our sector, aviation sector, continues to remain safe, Madam Speaker, and not only safe for persons who visit the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, but for our own people. We are, like my mama used to say, we are a traveling set of people, which is a good thing, Madam Speaker. And not only traveling, and I don't know, and this is just my eye test. I'm not saying this is what the numbers say, and this is a good thing. It seems as though Bahamians are even traveling more to the family of islands, which is good. I mean, to me, going to regattas now and seeing persons from Nassau in particular, and everybody just going to the various regattas throughout the family islands. It's a wonderful thing. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, we were at Crab Fest recently, and I saw Nassauvians at Crab Fest who I hadn't seen in 10 years. So, Madam Speaker, it's a wonderful thing, Madam Speaker. So the point is, these very important pieces of legislation that make regulation better, more efficient, to meet international standards, to meet FAA standards. It's vitally important, Madam Speaker, to our sector, aviation sector, Madam Speaker. Other colleagues have said here, and likewise, support the bill and support the bills and support the amendments, Madam Speaker. This issue about airports, I just wish to share on this issue of airports, Madam Speaker. 28 airports that we have, the 28 airports that we have. And obviously a lot, all of these family island airports don't necessarily, don't charge any particulars or charge certain fees, Madam Speaker. And so definitely the $2 or $3 million that has been budgeted over the many years is not sufficient. So the need for the PPPs is understandable, Madam Speaker, if we want to ensure that these airports are, that they advance, not only from a structural standpoint, but also from a technological standpoint, Madam Speaker. The only thing that we do emphasize is that when it comes to these PPPs in terms of, full disclosure of how they will operate, what does it mean for the Bahamian people in terms of costing and whatever exposure it means financially for the Bahamian people, Madam Speaker. But we have a beautiful country, Madam Speaker, that has some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. I always think about how, even from a development standpoint, as you seek to develop even more the family of islands, I'm sure there's a balance. In my view, there's a balance, because if you talk to some family islanders, and obviously there are members of Parliament that represent family islands here, depending on where you go, some persons on those islands don't want that type of development in their area, depending on where you go. And then it changes the dynamic of what that family island may become. Because in my experience in the hotel industry and in the hospitality industry, there are people who, they love They love the island experience. They just come to Nassau for a short bit, but really where they want to go is to one of the other family islands where they have the peace and tranquility. And that's why I understand when I talk to family members who are from Auckland, and they come to Nassau, and they see you, and they say, how long you here for, man? Not long, I came back to Auckland, man. Nassau too crazy, you know? And when they mean Nassau is too crazy, they love their way of life, and I understand it, Madam Speaker. Also, Madam Speaker, speaking about airports, Madam Speaker. So there was a notice, Madam Speaker, RE South Bimini International Airport, MIBS, PADP fees. These fees, Madam Speaker, for now Bimini Airport, Madam Speaker. So now all passengers, Madam Speaker, flying from Bimini on a domestic flight to Nassau or Freeport, or wherever, must now pay $20, a $20 passenger facility fee, a $5 passenger processing fee, a $1 passenger levy, Madam Speaker, total of $26. And in 6 months, on January 1st, these fees will go up by another $6 to $32. And on international flights, Madam Speaker, Bahamians leaving Bimini will pay $40 passenger facility fee, $10 passenger processing fee, $1 passenger levy, $51 in total. And also again, in 6 months, Madam Speaker, January 1st, these fees will go up by another $7 to $58, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, when you compare that, that's Bimini. And I hope that the member for West Grand Bahama in Bimini speaks to this, right? When you compare LPIA fees, right? $10 for passenger fee facility fee, $10 passenger processing fee, $20 in total, Madam Speaker. So NAD will charge Bahamians $20 to use LPIA, while the new operators of the Bimini Airport will charge Bahamians $26 or $6 more, 30% more, Madam Speaker. Outrageous, Madam Speaker. $38 passenger for international, $38 passenger facility fee, $10 passenger processing fee, total of $48. And so now NAD will charge Bahamians $48 to use LPIA, right? But the new operators of the Bimini Airport will charge Bahamians $51 or $3 more, Madam Speaker. 6% more, Madam Speaker. The disparity. And so a lot of Bahamians are asking about that disparity, Madam Speaker. And it is something that we hope that the government can elucidate a little bit more on, Madam Speaker, because people are complaining as they should, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I take my seat, Madam Speaker, it is my privilege, Madam Speaker, to contribute to this debate today. Again, these are very important pieces of legislation, and we agree. We do feel that obviously one of the signs of a mature democracy and a mature parliament, Madam Speaker, is that where we can find common ground, Madam Speaker, and common understanding and common appreciation for what needs to be done on particular pieces of legislation, Madam Speaker, we should come together, Madam Speaker. And so this is vitally important, Madam Speaker, and including the amendment to the law reform bill, correct? Yes. The law reform bill, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, grateful again to the people of St. Barnabas and this Parliament for the opportunity to contribute, Madam Speaker. And may God continue to bless you, Madam Speaker, and may He continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many.
short. Madam Speaker, I rise on behalf of the constituents of Michael who have afforded me once again the privilege of speaking on their behalf. Further, I have the honor of serving alongside the talented and hardworking members of the aviation community as Minister of State for Aviation, and to demonstrate my support for the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Amendment Bill 2024. Madam Speaker, as I have said before in this honorable place, passengers' confidence and aviation safety and security is indispensable to continue the growth of this industry. In 2020, the International Civil Aviation Organization advanced a shared position that a safe, secure, and sustainable restart and recovery of the global aviation sector is best supported by an international harmonized approach based on the following 10 key principles. Protect people, work as one aviation team and show solidarity, ensure essential connectivity, active manage safety, security, and health-related risks, make aviation public health measures a priority, strengthen public confidence, distinguish restart from recovery, support financial relief strategies to help the aviation industry, ensure sustainability, and 10, learn lessons to improve reliance. On the 1st of July last year, the Bahamas Department of Aviation, led by Acting Director of Aviation Kenneth Romer, delivered on his promises to implement an industry inclusive of national aviation strategic plan for the first time in our nation's history. This plan is not only aligned with global best practices, but has become a sought-after template and model for aviation excellence in the region and indeed globally. Among 8 broad themes outlined in this plan is a strategic focus on strengthening aviation safety and security system. Madam Speaker, the Bahamas is required to implement and conform to a safety oversight system promote aviation safety. This is achieved by overseeing and assessing the compliance of aircraft operators, severe improve with applicable regulations, procedure, and recommended practices. This mandate is further supported through safety and security audit conducted by the Civil Aviation Authority of the Bahamas to evaluate areas such as surveillance and compliance, risk assessment, and safety management. Today, the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas is responsible for safety and security oversight throughout the archipelago of the Bahamas and for all aviation matters as outlined in the Civil Aviation Act. Madam Speaker, several aviation authorities normally sit quietly in the aviation industry background, keeping an eye on things, setting and enforcing safety standards. Today, however, I wish to bring them out of the shadow and applaud the contribution of the Civil Aviation Authority, along with the many dedicated aviation team members who are taking aviation to unprecedented heights. Madam Speaker, the civil aviation in the Bahamas has a rich and impressed history. In May 1946, the Bahamas government formed the Civil Aviation Department, and Wing Commander E.R. Collins, an Air Force commander and former airline captain with Imperial Airways was appointed directors. On July 10th, 1973, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas became an independent nation. Weeks before independence, on June 26, 73, the Bahamas has become a contracting signatory state of the International Civil Aviation Organization. On May 15, 86, the introduction of radar control in the Bahamas was an historic event that would vastly improve the safety and efficiency of the Bahamian air traffic control system. Other improvement in aviation includes the construction of the new USA pre-clearance terminal and a new control tower and radar control facility. In 2001, the Flight Standards Inspectorate Unit was formed under the management of Captain Patrick Rowe. As the evolution continues, we saw the redevelopment of Nassau International Airport, renamed in 1957, and later Lynden Pinling International Airport, further to rename on July 6, 2006, with the domestic and international passenger terminal comparable to those in the developed countries. In 2011, the Bahamas became the first in the North America, Central American, and Caribbean region to implement the state safety program. On October 3rd, 2016, the enactment of the Civil Aviation Act 2016, another historic moment, emerged as the Civil Aviation Department transitioned to the Bahamas Civil Aviation Authority, effecting separation of the regulatory and safety oversight functions from the service provider, airport operators, and air navigational service, and ensuring that the Bahamas is better poised to meet ICAO standards and recommended practices. In 2018, the Cabinet of the Bahamas established the Department of Aviation in the Ministry of Tourism and Aviation organizational structure to provide oversight to all government entities involved in the aviation sector, to adjudicate and to resolve issues that develop between these entities, to provide depository for all matters relating to the aviation sector, and most importantly, to provide the necessary focus to the government and all goals in this critical, important sector. The Civil Aviation Authority, CAAB, is presently an arm of the Ministry of Tourism, Investment, and Aviation, and governed by a board of directors. Madam Speaker, throughout the evolution of the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas, this body has served as the regulator, operator, and service provider of the country's aviation industry, charged with responsibility to ensuring that regulations are in place to manage the development and operation of the national aviation industry, governed by legislation and compliance with international standard guidelines and best practices. Despite the growing pains of its formative years and the consistent challenges the aviation industry provides, the country is as proud of its achievement in developing industry, characterized by commitment to safety and security. Madam Speaker, the proposed amendment to the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Amendment Bill 2024 reflect the ongoing transformation and awareness of the positive role that the aviation plays in the economic development of the Bahamas, and as it continually seek ways to improve the movement of passengers and goods necessary for internal and international commerce. The civil aviation industry in the Bahamas continues to evolve as the countries continue to accentuate the no country left behind by ICAO in an effort to assist all of its member states in implementing ICAO standards and recommended practices. Madam Speaker, on January 27, 2020, the Bahamas conclude an air service agreement with the United States of America. This is an agreement between two nations to allow international commercial air transport services between the territories and covers the basic framework under which airlines are granted economic bilateral rights to fly between the two countries. Pursuant to Article 6, the air traffic agreement between the government of the United States of America and the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, either party may request consultation concerning the safety, standard maintenance by other parties relating to the aeronautical facilities, aircrew, aircraft, and operation of airlines of that other party. Madam Speaker, if follow such consultation, one party find that the other party does not effectively maintain administered safety standards and requirement in these areas that are at least equal to minimum standards that may be established pursuant to the Chicago Convention. The other party shall be notified of such findings and the steps considered necessary to conform with these minimum standards, and the other party shall take appropriate corrective actions within a reasonable time. Madam Speaker, members are aware that one such consultation, known as the Federal Aviation Administration International Aviation Safety Assessment, was conducted on the Civil Aviation Authority, Bahamas, from October 16th to the 20th, 2023, to determine its compliance with the safety standard of the International Civil Aviation Organization. Under the IASA program, the FAA assessed whether other countries' oversight of its air carriers that operate or seek to operate into the United States or carry a U.S. airline code complies with the international safety standard as laid out in the ICAO 8 critical elements of an effective aviation safety oversight system. During the FAA IASA, officials from the FAA represent the United States, and officials from the Civil Aviation Authority, Bahamas, AAA, represent the Bahamas. As part of the final discussion, an indication was made of the finding and also the corrective action to be taken around findings. Madam Speaker, as a result of the status finding of all the critical elements, one, that reflect primarily aviation legislation, the draft amendment bill and movement related thereto to amend the Civil Aviation and Civil Aviation Authority representatives is being proposed. By satisfactorily addressing these findings, the Bahamas would maintain its current rating will retain its current rating of A Category 1. This simply means that FAA inspectorate assess the country's Civil Aviation Authority and determine that its licenses and oversees air carrier in accordance with the ICAO aviation safety standards. Madam Speaker, many persons would recall that the Civil Aviation Authority in the Bahamas was previously addressed under the IASA program in February of 2017, which resulted in the IASA Category 1 rating, maintaining that the Commonwealth of the Bahamas has met international safety standard established by ICAO. This proposed amendments allow us to maintain the Category 1 rating and demonstrate that the Bahamas continues to meet Mr. Deputy Speaker, this Davis-led administration continues to demonstrate our commitments to not only expand airlift, but also supporting air carriers from the Bahamas who are currently approved to operate in the United States. As the Minister of State for Aviation, I support a system of safety and security oversight throughout the archipelago of the Bahamas and for all aviation matters, as outlined in the Civil Aviation Act, and I am therefore pleased to support the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Amendment Bill 2024. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, it has been a pretty full debate today, and so I do not intend on being too long. And there's been full contribution on both sides, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, I heard the comments made by the member for St. Barnabas, which reminded me that both my daughters this year graduated. My youngest daughter, Janae, graduated from the 6th grade Sunland Baptist Academy. She was the first, or not the first, but the highest female in her class when she graduated. So I wanted to publicly say how proud we are of Janae. Also, Mr. Deputy, we were pleased to have our second daughter, Jaylise, who graduated from high school this year. She graduated again with first class honors, and we were very pleased to, and we want to say publicly how pleased we are of her graduating. She graduated as the deputy head girl, and she does intend to go off to school this year studying mechanical engineering. So we are very pleased with her as well. And then while I'm on my feet, I might as well just say how pleased we are with our eldest daughter, Janae, our eldest daughter, Jaden, who will be, God willing, graduating from law school this coming December. So we are very pleased with her as well. Mr. Deputy, also I wanted to say for and on behalf of the Smiths Point residents that, and I know that the Minister of Works is aware of this with respect to their seawall. They have shown us some, very troubling photographs of some issues that they are having with that seawall. And so we want to just remind the member for Central and South Eleuthera that the Ministry of Works, we require them to take a look at that, and which we expect should be an easy fix, but it would be the seawall, the Smiths Point seawall. No, I don't think you all had looked at the, right, I don't think you all had looked at the Smiths Point seawall. I think it was the High Rock seawall that's what you all looked at. But residents have also raised the issue with the repair of the seawall in Smiths Point. Mr. Deputy, the civil aviation bills are very technical bills, but they are non-controversial bills. And the civil aviation is one of those areas that we ought to, both sides, we ought to work together to ensure the proper safety standards are met and that those proper safety standards are in place. And so this is just another example of, I believe, those of us on this side supporting the necessary amendments that are required. And what I believe all of the members on that side have indicated, as well as I believe some on this side, that these amendments are necessary to ensure that we continue to keep that Tier 1 rating with respect to our airports. And it would be disastrous, obviously, for us if we did not keep that rating. And so this was, again, a process that those of us on this side who were fortunate to be able to serve in the cabinet had to also go through, which was after an assessment was done. The assessment had indicated that there were these issues that the airport had required, and we had to act on those changes that were needed. And again, it was those changes that were needed very quickly, and they were needed to ensure that we continue to keep that Tier 1 rating. And so the government at that time did what was necessary to ensure that we upgraded the airport and that we upgraded the civil aviation industry to make sure that we kept that Tier 1 rating. Mr. Deputy, I do also want to sincerely thank the member for Exuma and Ragged Island, where he offered for us to be briefed on the bills. And he offered, I believe it was one of the lawyers from Civil Aviation, who did a very good job. He did a tremendous job of going through the bills for us, explaining the background, also indicating what was necessary, what was required, how the bill speaks to what and changes what was requested. And so I do want to thank him for that. It is a practice that I believe should be adopted for all of the pieces of legislation that are brought to Parliament. In my view, if everyone understands the significance of the legislation and it elevates the debate, so that when you are debating, it is foreseeable that when you debate, you are debating the issues rather than non-issues. And so I would make the request that in the same way that the member for Exuma offered briefing from a lawyer who knew about the bills, this could also be from a lawyer from the Attorney General's office who also may have been involved in drafting the bills. and also from the law reform. You know, we are speaking about the law reform bill is also a part of these bills that are being passed today. And so it is a request that I would make on behalf of those of us on this side that for all of the bills that are coming, that we can organize to have a attorney from either the Attorney General's office, the law reform, who can give a briefing on those details of the bills. I think, again, it would be a useful process for all of us, particularly those on the opposition side, to have a clearer understanding of the government's position and the government's reasoning from the technical persons. And any questions that we may have, we can ask them of the technical persons, and the technical persons can give their responses, give their technical answers, because that's precisely what happened. There were questions that were raised, and the attorney was able to adequately answer those questions. So if you were able to answer those questions, then there's no need for you to ask those questions on the floor. And so that's something that I would request. I know that we have coming up the cannabis bill, and again, it would be useful if the government would allow for someone from the Attorney General's office or from someone from the Ministry of Health to be prepared to go through that, a technical person and someone who is knowledgeable of the bills or who helped to draft the bill to be able to speak to the members of the opposition, to be able to brief us on those technical bills. It was, and I will say this, that it may not have been done when we were in government, but it is a useful step forward. It is something that I think both sides would benefit from if the technical persons were able to speak to those of us on this side, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, again, in principle, we have no difficulties. In fact, we agree that the Director General and the technical team should have full autonomy required, particularly when it comes to safety standards that are required. Also, in principle, I see no objection, again, to this, having had the privilege to sit in cabinet, make those kinds of decisions, and in most cases, decisions that are made from ministers and good ministers are taken after you have gotten the adequate advice from the technical staff and from the technical team. So again, it would make sense that particularly in an area like civil aviation, that we leave those technical issues and technical matters to the technical team and let the ministers and the board focus on the advancing the policy issues that we have the ability to be able to speak to. I know that both will continue to work together, but I think it is a useful classification to make sure that you have those two different issues. And also, Mr. Deputy, you know, it's almost a part of the Bahamian culture that, you know, in the Bahamas, once you are elected to Parliament, and once you become if you are elected to Parliament and appointed minister, you are automatically expected to know everything about everything in your ministry. And the reality is that's not the case, and we must rely on the advice that we are given from the technical staff. And in most cases, the technical staff are the same people who advised you, who advised the previous government. In most cases, they are also the same people who are advising the other side as well. Also, I want to thank the member for Michael, because the member for Michael, I thought, gave a very good history of the achievements of the civil aviation, and gave a very non-political history, because he spoke of what took place under a PLP administration, and he also spoke to what took place under an F&M administration. He spoke to what took place in 2011. He spoke to what took place in 2018, in 2020. And those were, again, significant achievements, and those achievements were made under a free national movement government. So I want to thank him again for giving the full picture of what had taken place in civil aviation. Just before I take my seat, Mr. Deputy, there were a number of issues I suspect that were raised, and I just wanted to make some comment on those issues that were raised. The member for Exuma, I believe, raised the issue of Bahamas Air. And, you know, there's been a long, I guess, standing debate in terms of what Bahamas Air ought to be, and what Bahamas Air needs to be, and what direction they should be going. For my part, I agree with the member for Exuma. I believe that, you know, it is one of those things where I don't know if we will ever have a Bahamas Air that the central government does not subsidize. There may be a question as to the level of this subsidy, and we can argue about what that amount of the subsidy will be. But I believe that there will always be room there for the central government to be able to subsidize Bahamas Air, because again, Bahamas Air is one of those entities that is an airline, but it is also a national service to the country. And so when you look at things like repatriation, that's a national service. When you look at what was done yesterday in traveling to Jamaica to remove students, to remove Bahamians, again, that's a national service. When it comes to evacuating persons from hurricanes, that's a national service. And those kinds of decisions have to be made where you are able to move Bahamas airplanes to accommodate national interests. And so, you know, we can talk about making Bahamas Air more efficient. We can talk about making it independent more without having all of the political influence. But at the end of the day, Bahamas Air has to continue to remain a national interest, and has to continue to achieve those national interests for the country. Again, Mr. Deputy, one of the issues, again, that was raised by some of the technicians was that, and this is something that I witnessed, all of the bills, the civil aviation bills that come, they appear to be where there is a threat of, if you do not do this, you are in danger of losing your Tier 1 status. And, you know, in doing that, you almost are negotiating with a gun to your head. I mean, that's the reality of either government. It doesn't matter. But when you are in that seat and the FAA or the international regulators say to you, this is what we require, if you do not do this, then you are in danger of losing your Tier 1 status, and we do not want that to happen. My question is, how can we work to, instead of these things being where you have to do this and there is a time frame that is put on you to do this, is there a way for you to have almost a permanent on-staff, what I would call consultant, who may be continuously communicating with these agencies, and instead of waiting for an assessment to be done, that there is an ongoing assessment, that assessment almost never ends, that there is a continuous assessment being done so that you are continually upgrading what is required, because we know in this industry, it is a dynamic industry. It changes. What was accepted one year may not be accepted in another year. But it has to be a way where we can continue the upgrade process in a way where if an assessment is being done next year, we almost already know what those requirements would be or what those standards are, so that we can even put those things in place even before the assessment is done. So that once that assessment is done, that there shouldn't be any need for us to upgrade, because we have been upgrading over the years. We were upgrading to ensure that we kept up to date with those standards. There must be a way for us to do it without waiting for that assessment to be done and then having to act quickly if that, with those things for the assessment to be done. Mr. Deputy, also the member for Exuma spoke about the overflight fees. And in his description of what the status was, that sort of raised, I guess, some questions that I believe myself and I believe some members of the public, I suspect, would also have, which is, if I understood him correctly, that while there was an agreement for the airlines to pay a specific amount, the airlines had an issue with it, and that amount was being held, I suppose, in trust or held until this dispute would have been resolved, and that the government made an offer which is now going through the process of consultation. And with respect to that offer, what is the difference of what was agreed and what the government offered, and whether what the government offered covers, or how does that cover the cost with the aviation industry? Because obviously the in-flight fees or the overflight fees, the purpose of those overflight fees was to upgrade the industry. Now, we can have a fight any day with the airlines. We can have issues with the airlines any day. But the purpose of that would have been to upgrade the Bahamian civil aviation industry. And so we understand this is what was agreed. We understand that there's a dispute. And if I understand the member for Exuma correctly, there was an offer which is different from what is agreed. You may, as well as you may not be able to disclose what that is, but we'd like to understand what the difference is between what was agreed and what that amount was which was offered, and how likely is it that what was offered would be accepted. What are the consultations telling you as to whether this is something that may, as well as it may not be accepted? I think that's one of the questions that I had, one of the questions I believe that members of the public would also have with respect to those overflight fees. There's also, Mr. Deputy, an issue that was raised. I believe it was a customs flyer that came out with respect to landing on landing fees, or an increase in landing fees for private commercial private commercial flights, as well as private flights for cargo flights and private recreational flights. I had a meeting with the couple of members from the Bahamas Pilots Association, particularly those in Freeport, because I guess this affects those in Freeport a little bit more than it affects those in Nassau. That's what I was advised, but particularly those in Freeport. And their issue was they would like some clarification they would like, first of all, I guess, to have a meeting with those persons who put in place the fees or the increase in fees. And we would hope that this does not go down the same road that the issue with the boaters went down. Again, they say that there was no consultation. No one had spoken to them prior to the increase in those fees. And in some cases, the fees would be increased from $50 to $300. There is a question whether, because there's one fee for if you have a private plane that has 4 or less seats, and then if you have a private plane that has 4 or more seats. They would like to understand how that was arrived at, or why that difference would, why that difference is significant. They also would like to understand there's also a separate fee if you are taking a flight, a recreation flight. Now, what was explained to me was that most private planes they own those planes. So if you are taking your family, or if you're taking your, even if it's your business partner, or you're taking those persons to the U.S., they would like to understand, if it is my plane, is it recreation, or does it apply to those who have the 4 seats or the 6 seats? So they would like to understand that difference. They said that it may be confusing to them in terms of what applies. So we'd like you to have a conversation with them so that they can be fully briefed as to what happened, that you can hear their complaint, because they obviously have a complaint in terms of the increase in those fees. One person said to me that it may be a difference of where they used to fly once or twice a week to now it may be where they may only be flying once a month. And so they would like to, again, understand what the rationale behind that was. And then, Mr. Deputy, the issue again was raised with respect to the Grand Bahama Airport. And I want to attempt to address this sort of in a non-contentious, non-political way, and to ask this question: what is happening with respect to the airport deal? I know that there may be some things that you cannot say if you are still having negotiations and so on with respect to this deal. But from the public standpoint, the public, I believe, needs to understand what is happening with this deal. At one point, the members of the government were able to give timelines to say that they anticipated that the airport construction would start at this particular time. If the airport construction started at this time, then the completion would be at this time. I noticed that you've sort of stopped from giving those kinds of timelines. And again, I understand why, I understand why one would stop from giving. I don't understand why you did, but I understand why one could possibly stop from giving those. And so, as best as you can, if you can articulate what the situation is with respect to the airport, can you give a timeline as to when you anticipate the airport commencing construction? And once the construction commences, what that timeline would be for completion? Can you also give an idea as to what the financial arrangements would be for the Manchester Group? What is the situation going to be in terms of the PPP, so that, again, we can understand what the financial implications would be? One of the examples of why this question is so relevant is the issue that was raised with South Bimini, where you have a PPP, again, a non-governmental person who is now responsible for that airport, and now those fees have increased, and the folks in Bimini are having an issue with those fees being increased. And so we would again want to understand what is the situation with respect to Grand Bahamas Airport, and if those kinds of fees would, are we able to anticipate that those are the kind of fees that Freeport is going to have? And I would caution that when you look at these kinds of fees, use Nassau on the Providence as a guideline that family islands should not be more than Nassau, because in a lot of cases, family islands are competing with Nassau in terms of having their visitors. So if it costs more to go to the family islands than it is to go to Nassau, and it is something that can be controlled in terms of the passenger taxes or the passenger fees, what we should do is seek to make sure that those passenger fees are not more than Nassau. And so I would ask the government to take a second look at the South Bimini issue, because from what it appears, that cost is more to go to Bimini than it is to go to Nassau. And we would hope that that type of situation does not happen when you are looking at Grand Bahama. And so those would be the points that I would raise on this side, Mr. Deputy. We on this side, as we say, when it comes to these technical bills, we are happy to cooperate with the government to ensure that we support these bills, to ensure that the Bahamas keeps their Tier 1 status. It is in all of our interests that the Bahamas keeps this Tier 1 status. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. I stand to wrap up this debate, and I will endeavor to be as brief as I possibly can. Firstly, let me extend my sincere thank you to all of the members of the government and opposition side for pledging their support for these important pieces of legislation. We have expressed the critical nature of passing these bills expeditiously, and I'm delighted we've been able to get them on the agenda to do just that. They certainly are in the national interest, and as you saw, they are highly technical in nature. So once again, I want to thank the Office of the Attorney General, the Civil Aviation Authority of the Bahamas, and all those involved for causing this to happen very quickly. Mr. Deputy, I want to address a few issues raised, and given the expediency of the moment, I promise not to address the same old tired talking points of a political nature, but I'll stick to the substance of the points raised today, Mr. Deputy. Firstly, the member for Marco City raised a number of pertinent questions. Some of the points or questions raised were clearly well intended, but he may not have had the fullest advice on some of the points, and therefore I wish to clarify. When the CAB validate a foreign license for a pilot, that validation is only valid so long as the foreign license remains valid. There are times when we cap, convert, and when we convert a license, that becomes a Bahamian license, and it's treated as a standalone license, and that Bahamian pilot holds a sovereign document of the Bahamas, and therefore he is licensed as a pilot in the Bahamas. So there are two options. There is the validation, and there is the conversion. One of the things that the Civil Aviation Authority of the Bahamas is doing at the moment is implementing Bahamas air law testing. And you may have heard some concern expressed about this requirement, but it's in good form. It's the right thing to do. And we are ensuring that we work with Bahamian pilots to ensure that we put in place the mechanism for appropriate training on Bahamas law as it relates to aviation. This will be a new component, and we're working along with BALPA, the Airline Pilots Association, to ensure that this process is smooth. There was an issue raised about not being enough check pilots. These are persons who verify competence as it relates to flying a particular type of aircraft. So in the event that CAB do not have inspectors who are appropriately certified, qualified in a particular type of aircraft, this is where they outsource to a foreign designee if we do not have that expertise in-house. Finally, one or two of members opposite recommended a national think tank. I want to let you know that the Director of Aviation has been very forward-looking as it relates to stakeholder engagement. Over the course of the last 2 years, we've implemented a national strategic aviation plan, and that came as a result of ongoing, consistent consultation and engagement. There's a strategic aviation task force. There are regular aviation stakeholder meetings, and at least once a year there's a full day or two set aside for discussing these general issues. The member for St. Anne's noted a few what he termed as typographical or drafting issues, and most of these will be covered under the slip rule. They will be considered appropriately, and I must say that he did so in his brief moment of sobriety, raised these issues, and I thank him for doing so, and they will be considered. Mr. Deputy, the member for East Long Island, during my budget presentation, I'm not sure whether he missed it, but we will be going to build the Deadman's Key Airport, and we foreshadowed that we will be using the Great Harbor Key model, which will allow us to expedite this process given that the designs only require minor adjustments. This will include an extension of the runway in Deadman's Key. We're well aware of the problems associated with the hill in Deadman's Key and with the condition of the runway, et cetera, and this is a priority item. The member for St. Barnabas, I believe, raised a question about Grand Bahama and the $2 billion of investments. And I want to say that I say in great seriousness, when the member for Kalani was Prime Minister, he had a very bad habit of talking down the economy of the Bahamas. And we warned over and over that this was an incredibly bad idea. And I see a troubling pattern, as I mentioned earlier, of members opposite consistently talking down the economy of Grand Bahama. I think this is an incredibly self-defeating proposition. And when you talk about the $2 billion of investment, you need only look at Carnival that's spending $600 million. The project is underway, people are employed, contractors are working, and it's progressing. And you only need to look at the shipyard. Likewise, similar scenario, 600 million plus 600 million is 1.2 million. And if you need the list of the remaining 800,000, we would be happy to provide it for you. These are real projects, and we anticipate that we will see development and progress with all of these developments driving the economy of the island of Grand Bahama. The member for East Grand Bahama, in his mostly measured comments, made reference to the overflight fees. And again, this is a technical, complex matter. And the dispute, if you may call it that, arose as a result of the airlines wanting clarity as it relates to the fees and whether the ICAO principles of cost relatedness were applied. In fact, what that means is that that BANZA in the overflight fees may recover, project and recover fees associated directly with air navigation services. The other principle of this process is transparency, and therefore we are required to open our books, justify the fees we are charging, and whilst we may project that it's going to cost X based on the budget for the fees over the next 2-3 years, at the end of that period, we are required to do a consultation. So when you say we would have made an offer, I say we are in the consultation phase. And as a result of this consultation phase, we have an obligation to justify the fees that we're charging. And at the end of this process, there will be a determination as to what the new fees will be and whether there will be any changes. I commend you for accepting the briefing on the Civil Aviation Authority bills. I've offered previously a briefing as it relates to the overflight fees and the ongoing discussions. We will be happy to do that as well. This is a public consultation. All airspace users are entitled to make comments as it relates to the fees being charged. This information is posted on the BANZA website and is accessible, and therefore we are completely transparent in these matters, and we'd be happy to discuss them at any time. Mr. Deputy, there was some concern expressed about airport fees. Let me firstly tell you that I have ordered a study on regional airports to ensure, firstly, that in the Bahamas we are competitive. And when we talk about fees at airports, we must look collectively at all of them: passenger fees, landing fees, securities fees, departure tax, etc. And we're taking a look at a fee study at the moment for regional airports. But let me just make a very important point. Bahamas has 28 airports that's managed by the Airport Authority. We must maintain these airports at a standard of international caliber for safety and security. This must be paid for, and therefore it cannot be a feeless system. It's simply not the way it works in the real world, and therefore we are committed to improving infrastructure, and as a result of improving infrastructure, we believe that we would be well positioned to justify the fees we charge in line with the service we offer and the quality of the airport that we provide. When I'm done. As it relates to Grand Bahama, I can tell you that we have done an extensive business plan supported by the Manchester Airport Group, and the projections therein does not forecast any increase in the fees for the Grand Bahama International Airport. At the moment, I believe that the fees for Grand Bahama are in line or higher than New Providence. I would want to validate that. But I will tell you, there is no forecasted increase. I have gone to great lengths, Mr. Deputy, during the budget presentation to explain what is happening with every single airport throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I don't intend to repeat that today, Mr. Deputy, but the reality is that we are working very hard. We're making steady progress. You heard during the budget debate, we provided a resolution for $125 million of funding that's going to support some of these works. Some of them will be by PPP, others will be supported by these low-interest loans, and therefore, Mr. Deputy, we are moving swiftly ahead. Now, let me just say as I conclude, Mr. Deputy, that the Civil Aviation Authority of the Bahamas has an important mandate to ensure the safety, the security of the traveling public, to protect the national interest in these matters, and is therefore with pleasure that I thank them for the work that they have done in relation to these bills. And I thank all of those involved at the Attorney General's office, as well as in the Office of CAP and the consultants engaged to get us to this specific particular point. I'm proud of the Bahamian professionals engaged, and I look forward to continuing the efforts to maintain Category 1 for the Bahamas, and this certainly will prove to be beneficial to the Bahamian travelers, professionals in the aviation space, airline operators who seek to traverse and do business in the United States of America, and of course to bring comfort to Bahamians who travel, as well as foreigners who visit. And with this, Mr. Deputy, I so move and ask that the question be put.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for St. Barnabas.
Mr. Deputy. Through you, Mr. Deputy, to the member for Exuma. The member for Exuma, so you've talked about, you just talked about a couple minutes ago about needing to obviously improve on infrastructure of the airports, and essentially that fees are going to be required to ensure the further development, if you will, of infrastructure and other development at these various airports. So is it fair to say that, like Bimini, in the future there are going to be more fees at other airports around the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and that the Bahamian people in those various family islands, but the country at large, should expect increases at those airports?
Mr. Deputy.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member.
Mr. Deputy, I've addressed this issue succinctly, and I have no further comments on it. this is now a serious moment of passing these important bills. And I ask that we continue to keep it that way.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
I ask, Mr. Deputy, that the question be put. If the member has additional questions, he can put them under notices, Mr.
Noted, Honourable Member.
Mr. Deputy, the seriousness didn't just come upon us. The seriousness started from this debate. And a legitimate question was asked, if the member doesn't feel, if the member doesn't feel, then he can say that. It's a serious question.
Yeah.
He made a point about, the members made a point about the development of the airports and how there will be a need for fees to pay for whatever vision it is that the government has. Mr. Deputy.
No, he was making sense too. Of course, of course. This man done come drawing my people. Oh, I hate. Look at him, Miss Watts. Look at him. Look at what.
He was bored. He was bored.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Golden Gates.
Madam Speaker,
My tongue
I
gone,
do now resolve that the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole. Oh, second reading? Okay, sorry. Oh, I move for the second reading the following bills, Madam Speaker.
You can do it.
The Civil Aviation Amendment Bill 2024.
Thank you, honourable members. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Civil Aviation Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to amend the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Act. Civil Aviation, sorry.
Thank you. For the second reading?
Madam Speaker, I move for the second reading of the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Amendment Bill 2024.
Second.
Thank you, honourable members. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to amend the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Act.
Thank you. For the second reading?
Madam Speaker, I move for the second reading of the Law Reform and Revision Amendment Bill 2024.
Thank you, honourable members. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Law Reform and Revision Act 2023. As many are in favor, will remain seated.
24.
It's supposed to be 24A. No, 24 will be the new name.
Okay, thank you.
As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Ordered that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
An act to amend the Law Reform and Revision Act 2023.
For the second reading?
No further second readings, Madam Speaker. I now resolve that the House resolve itself, I now move that the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with the Deputy Speaker in the chair.
Thank you, honourable members. It's been moved and seconded that the House do now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with the Deputy Speaker in the chair. As many that are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The House will now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with the Deputy Speaker in the chair.
The law reform review bill is 2024, Madam Speaker, not 2023.
It would be a
The amendment that is being proposed today amends the Act of 2023. But there was an amendment. Look at it's the long title and the short title. So that is where you might be confused.
Well, I tell you about my job, and I tell you I know my job. Leave my job alone. Papa.
All right, let's rock and roll. Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the long title of the Civil Aviation Amendment Bill 2024 be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that Clause 1 of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 1 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Clause 1 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that Clause 2 of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 2 of the bill be agreed. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma,
Chairman, I
Ragged
move an
Island.
amendment to Clause 2, delete the word "and" immediately after the word "validated" and substitute the word "or."
It has been moved and seconded that the Clause 2 be amended as read. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Clause 2 is amended as read.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill is agreed in its entirety.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The bill in its entirety is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the long title of the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Amendment Bill 2024 be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
One second.
Yes.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I move that Clause 1 and 2 of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 1 and 2 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Clause 1 and 2 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that Clause 3 of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that Clauses 3 of the bill be agreed. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Mr. Chairman, I move the following amendment, that the bill is amended by A, renumbering Clause 3 as Clause 4, and Clause 4 as Clause 6. B, inserting a new Clause 3 as follows. Amendment of Section 7 of the Principal Act. Section 7(4) is amended by the insertion immediately after the words "contracting state," where it appears at the end of the sentence of the words
provided that the requirements under which such licenses or certificates were issued or rendered valid are equal to or better than the applicable standards specified in an annex. And C, inserting a new clause 5 as follows. Amendment of Section 15 of the Principal Act. Section 15 is amended by the deletion of Section 5 and the substitution of the following. 5, the Director General may, where he considers it justifiable, delegate safety management-related functions and activities to another state or regional safety oversight organization, or SOO. And 6, where the Director General delegates a safety management-related function and activity pursuant to subsection 5, the Director General shall notify the Minister of the delegation.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 3 be amended as read. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Clause 3 is amended as read.
Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 4 and 5 as amended be agreed.
4 and 5. It has been moved and seconded that clauses 4 and 5 be agreed. As many as they were amended? Okay. Clauses 4 and 5 be amended as read. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Clauses 4 and 5 is amended as read.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be agreed in its entirety. As amended.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill be amended as read. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The bill in its entirety is amended as read.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the long title of the Law Reform and Revision Amendment Bill 2024 be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The bill in its entirety is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Speaker do now take the chair.
It has been moved and seconded that the Speaker do now take the chair. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The Speaker will now take the chair. Madam Speaker, I beg leave to report that we have examined several bills making amendments thereto.
Honorable members, the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole has reported that the committee has examined several bills having made amendments thereto. Third reading and passing.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I move for the third reading and passing of the Civil Aviation Amendment Bill 2024.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and passed. A bill for an act to amend the Civil Aviation Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Ordered that the bill be read for a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to amend the Civil Aviation Act.
Order that this bill do not pass and the title thereof declared to be Civil Aviation Amendment Bill 2024. Further third readings?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I move for the third reading and passing of the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Amendment Bill 2024.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and passed. A bill for an act to amend the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Act. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read for a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to amend the Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Act.
Order that this bill do not pass and the title thereof declared to be Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Amendment Act 2024. Further third reading and passings?
Madam Speaker, I move for the third reading and passing of the Law Reform and Revision Amendment Bill.
Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and passed. A bill for an act to amend the Law Reform and Revision Act 2023. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read for a third time and passed.
A bill for an act to amend the Law Reform and Revision Act 2023.
Order that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Law Reform and Revision Amendment Act 2024. Further third readings?
No further third readings, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. No, Sinat? Ordered that the clerk do take the bills passed by this House today to the Honorable Senate for their concurrence. They like to live in the past, eh? Oh, boy. We will now revert back to the order of business. Consideration of Senate's amendments, resolutions, member statements, appointment of select committees, instructions to select committee, discharge of select committees, notices for future meetings.
Madam Speaker, I rise to renew all notices on behalf of the government.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Honorable Member for Sinat.
Yes, Madam Speaker. Did we already deal with member statements?
We sure have. We're down on notices for future. We're down on notices for future meetings.
I just thought someone would speak from one of the ministries, particularly Works, that they were going to cover the trench that runs across East Bay Street now, Eastern Road now, and is creating a lot of traffic on Montague Foreshore. And since no one did, I'm glad that I was given the opportunity to do so, Madam Speaker. But I just needed to say that. And in addition to that, I do renew all notices in the name of the opposition, Madam Speaker. And I'm presently aware that the government intends to debate on the 8th of July, Madam Speaker. And since we are sitting this month in accordance with the rules, Madam Speaker, we're sitting in this month, so the second Wednesday of the month, which is July 10th, we should also be returning for question time, Madam Speaker.
That's a holiday. But
so we can do that. Just when there is a work day. So which day can we come back for question time, Madam Speaker? Or is government side trying to go into the summer holiday without addressing all the questions on the table?
Madam Speaker,
the chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden Gates.
as we always do, we will correspond in advance with the Leader of Opposition Business.
Thank you, honorable member. I hope it's not on the 10th.
He can come on the 10th. He can come on the 10th.
Oh, Oh, my dear. Adjournment. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahamas. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. No, it was in reference to something I had said during the debate, whether or not the opposition would be able to have a briefing with respect to, I think the next bill that we debate is the cannabis bill. If we can have a bill. But I just wanted to ask the government. I mean, they may or may not be prepared to answer at this point, but I wanted to ask the government whether or not we could have a briefing from one of the lawyers that drafted the bill, or one of the technical persons that is knowledgeable of the bill, if we could have a briefing with respect to the bill. That's all I was asking.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden Gates.
Madam Speaker, as I said regarding the question posed by Sinans, we will correspond with the opposition. We did present a tentative schedule of bills to be debated. That may change. If that does, we will let them know, and of course, I will consult with the designated minister regarding East Grand Bahamas question.
Okay. Thank you, honorable member. That answers your questions? Okay, all right then. Adjournment?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House to adjourn to Monday, the 8th of July, 2024 at 10 a.m.
Is there a second? Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that the House do now adjourn to its rising on, what is it? On Monday, 8th of July, 2024 at 10 a.m. As many that are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Final adjournment?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Thank you, honorable member. It has been moved and seconded that the House do now adjourn to Monday, 8th of July, 2024 at 10 a.m. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The House stands adjourned until Monday, 8th of July, 2024 at 10 a.m.
All rise.
A blessed good morning, honorable members, and those under the sound of my voice. In our Moments of Impact devotional segment, I'll be sharing a devotional today entitled, Lead with Courage. I think all of us would agree that leadership is not for the weak or the faint of heart. While many envy leadership positions for various reasons, the reality is being a leader is no walk in the park. In my personal times of meditation, I often reflect on the modern interpretation of the quote from William Shakespeare's Henry IV that says, "Heavy is the head that wears the crown." This statement bears true on many different fronts because leaders are often tasked with the onerous and daunting responsibilities of casting vision, engineering new pathways, creating synergy, solving problems, fighting injustice, making tough decisions, and simply keeping it all together. As leaders carry out their responsibilities, they are often met with great opposition, criticism, and resistance. Therefore, it is incumbent for 21st century leaders to lead with courage. To lead with courage means to lead with fearlessness, resilience, determination, and grit. A biblical example of the importance of leading with courage is found in the book of Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 4 to 8, which records how God called him to be a leading prophetic voice to the nations. And it reads, "And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee to be a prophet to the nations. Then said I, Ah, Lord God, behold, I cannot speak, for I am a child. But the Lord said unto me, Say not that you are a child, for you shall go wherever I send you, and whatever I command you to do, you shall speak. And so be not afraid of their faces, for I am with you to deliver you, says the Lord." The moral of this story is leading with courage requires you to not lean on your own strength or understanding, but to trust God to see you through every difficult situation. In conclusion, as we prepare to celebrate 51 years of independence, and as we continue to make our mark on the world stage, we must not allow the size of our country to determine the size of our courage. Neither must we allow anyone or anything to cause us to cower in fear. Isaiah 41:10 says, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. And I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness." 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind." And so as a nation, we must be bold. We must be strong. We must be courageous. We must not be afraid. Neither must we be discouraged. God is with us. And if God be for us, who can be against us? Selah. Think and act on these things. Let us pray. O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth, who has set thy glory above the heavens. For you are the King of kings and the Lord of lords, and for this we praise and exalt your name today. We thank you for your goodness to us as an independent nation over the past 50 years. We thank you for the green pastures that lie ahead of us. O Lord, as a nation, we pray that you would give us the courage to overcome the forces of darkness and evil. Give us the courage to fight against injustice and inequality. Give us the courage, O God, to stand up against the world giants who will at times seek to bully us, to promote their selfish agenda. Give us the courage, Almighty God, to fight for our preservation. Give us the courage, Almighty God, to remain a God-fearing people. And so, Father, today we pray for our parliamentarians, and we ask, oh God, that you would grant them the courage to make the right decisions for our citizenry. Give our parliamentarians the courage to embrace change. Give them the courage to stand for righteousness. And, oh God, as they assemble in this honorable house today, give them the courage to face whatever difficulty that lies ahead of them. We pray, Almighty God, that you would govern the affairs of this house today and continue to favor the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And finally, Lord, we pray for our neighbors in the Caribbean that are in the path of Hurricane Beryl. Lord, we pray for your divine covering and your protection for those islands. We ask that you would preserve life and keep them safe through the storm's passage. These things we humbly ask today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let us pray the Lord's Prayer. Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Davis, Chester Cooper, Brad Mitchell, Gladys Hannah Martin, Alfred Sayers, Dr. Michael Davo, Clay Sweeting, Keith Bell, Wayne Monroe, Vaughn Miller, Joe Colby Davis, Ginger Moxie, Mario Bolag, Jomo Campbell, Basil McIntosh, Miles Zeroda, Pia Glover Roll, Lisa Ramming, Zane Lightburn, Dr. Hubert Minnis, Jamal Strawn, John Pinder, Bacchus Roll, Leon Lundy, Kirk Cornish, Wade Watson, Leonardo Lightburn, Leah Miller-Bryce, Leroy Major, Sylvanus Petty, Mikhail Barnaby, Michael Pintard, James Gracie Thompson, Hiram Lewis, Shannon Ron Cartwright, Adrian Gibson, Adrian White, Kingsley Smith.
Good morning, honorable members. Good morning. We will now go down the order of business as we conduct the people's business. Introduction and swearing in of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden Gates.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Price Control General Amendment Number 6, Regulations 2024.
Thank you, honorable member. Is there a seconder? Thank you, honorable members. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you. Order that the document do line the table. For the laying of documents.
Laying of documents.
Thank you, honorable member. Statement and communication by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Foxhill.
Yeah. Sorry? Yeah, please, if you can. It'll only be, I apologize for this, Madam Speaker, but given the exigencies of the moment, I have to do this orally again. I just want to report that since I spoke to the House on Monday, the government of the Bahamas made some decisions with regard to airlifting the Bahamian citizens out of Jamaica. There was a request from students who were in Jamaica, about 30 of them, that they wished to be returned to Nassau in the face of Hurricane Beryl. And the decision was taken yesterday morning that that would be the most appropriate and safe thing to do. So with the assistance of Bahamas Air and our Consul General, Alveda Knight, in Jamaica, and the cooperation of the Jamaican government, we were able to mobilize the resources of the Bahamas government to airlift some 35 people out of Kingston yesterday. This included 2 citizens of our neighbor countries, one from Anguilla and the other from the Turks and Caicos Islands, whose governments had asked us to assist them with the airlifting. So at around, I guess that was about 8:30 or so last night, the plane arrived here with everybody safe and sound. And the students were certainly gratified, and their parents, at the effort taken to do this. So I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank Bahamas Air and all the public officials who were responsible. Tanya Pratt is the chair of Bahamas Air, and they all did a magnificent job, the managing director, in mobilizing resources to get that done. To just do a review of what has transpired since the hurricane went through the Southern Caribbean. So Barbados has had damage largely to their marine sector. The Prime Minister reported yesterday when there was a heads of government meeting, an emergency heads of government meeting by Zoom yesterday, and she reported essentially that their fishing sector has been totally destroyed as a result of the storm. But there's been no report of loss of life, which thankfully is the case. Similarly, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there was significant property damage. I think there was one report of loss of life, but they're still reconnoitering at the moment to determine the extent of the damages in their adjoining islands. Grenada got a direct hit. Its smaller islands, Petite Martinique and Carriacou, were directly hit, and their housing stock is almost 100% destroyed. So they have significant issues which they have to face. Our Director General, Judicial Ali, and two members of Foreign Service staff were actually in Grenada because they had gone there in advance of the heads of government meeting, which is supposed to have taken place over these few days and which has now been canceled. They were airlifted out of Grenada after the storm yesterday and landed here about 12:15